So like Inspector Skondiak said, I've been on the team for almost 3 years, and Jenny has been working with the shelter now for
Almost 7.
almost 7. So tonight we're just going to kind of give you a brief overview of what we do, and how we can help the community. And if anyone has any questions at any point, please let us know. I do have a PowerPoint to try and keep me on track, but I do tend to just talk, so keep me in line if you need to. So the Safe Family Intervention Team is a partnership between the Medicine Hat Women's Shelter Society and the Medicine Hat Police Service. So kind of a background. In 2014, we had a very tragic incident. It was a murder-suicide that claimed the lives of 2 people. And at that time, our chief and the shelter got together and said, what can we do? What can we do to prevent this from happening in our community in the future? And that's kind of how SFIT was born. So in 2014, we had 1 MHPS member and I think 2 outreach workers at the time. Now we have 1 outreach supervisor, 3 outreach workers, and an intake worker. So it's continuously growing because the need is just obviously growing. So yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add to that or?
No, not to that.
Okay. Our mission is to provide a collaborative, timely, and effective team response in partnership with support agencies to assist families in dealing with incidents of family violence. So I think in the next slide here, I'll talk about what I do specifically, and then how Jenny and her team kind of take over once they get the referrals from the police service. So just to give you an idea, here's our stats. So in 2014, when it was created, we were at 967 calls for service. And then if you look up to 20 and 22, we're at 1,599 calls for service. And then you can see we had 321 charge files. So that was police related, not necessarily people that came into the program. They were just specifically police related calls for family violence and domestic violence. I guess some points to, so in the past, our program relied heavily on the victims being cooperative in engaging with our services. So in 2014, when we kind of made SFIT, I guess what changed was an agreement between the shelter and the police service that we're going to forward all of these files and have the outreach team make the phone calls, offer that support rather than waiting for the victim to come forward. And I think it's been hugely successful because our referral numbers have just like skyrocketed. And it's really important that the police aren't the ones reaching out, because a lot of times in these situations, they don't necessarily want to talk to police in time of crisis. And having these amazing support workers are, I think, key at getting these people to engage in the services they require. So, what else do we have here? I don't know if you have anything to add to this, Jenny, but I'll just keep rambling.
Well, do you want me to
yeah.
tell a little bit of the process that we get? Once we get the referrals, we actually are cold calling them. So just out of the blue, we're picking up the phone and we're calling them to ask them if they're looking for, they're needing some supports, whether it's one-to-ones, go into shelter, safety planning, all that kind of stuff. So some of them are really happy to hear from us. Some of them aren't very happy to hear from us. But sometimes those ones that aren't happy to hear from us also will call us back after we planted that seed on the services that we can offer them. So.
And I guess one thing I'd like to add too, like what SFIT, like our whole purpose, right, is that prevention piece. So if we can get to these families and provide that support in the very early stages, and the way I look at things, if they're making a call to the police, then it's really important that we start that intervention piece immediately to prevent things from escalating further or, you know, tragedies happening in our community. So I think that's really important, regardless of the seriousness of the offense. If we can get that support in place immediately, that's the intervention piece that we're kind of hoping to, I guess,
to connect with.
Yeah.
And some of them, when you look, some of the files that we get, we're like, that doesn't seem like such a big incident. But once we call them and they engage, and then you realize this has been going on for years and years. It's not just that one-off that it appears to be. So we've captured lots of people who were struggling in silence that are coming in, doing their safety planning, and leaving the relationship or getting the supports for both partners so they can stay together and be a happy, healthy, non-toxic family.
So some of the support agencies that we work with in the community, we work with Child and Family Services. So if there's any children that are affected by family violence, it's really important that they are involved and make sure that the child is not, there's no safety concern for the child. We also work with the Crown Prosecutor. We work with probation, obviously the Medicine Hat Women's Shelter Society, our Victim Service Unit, and community housing, and just some of the other agencies. Like, we can refer them to mental health, addictions, if that's what they require. And sometimes they need that intervention piece before they actually connect and start the domestic violence prevention piece, depending on, you know, the situation. So it's just that connection point, right? Like within the community to get them to where they need to go. So once a week we actually meet. So every Thursday at 2 o'clock, we meet with the Crown Prosecutor and we go over all the files that are upcoming for court on Monday. And these are all the support agencies that are involved. So I give any updates from the police side of things. Our Child and Family Services worker gives any, you know, family-related information that they might have in regards to the children. And we kind of get all on the same page. It's actually a really neat meeting. Because when I came into this unit, I had no idea that kind of information was shared amongst the community. So it's been super beneficial.
So in the charge files too, when we have these conversations on Thursdays with the Crown Prosecutor, we also do Crown interviews. And a Crown interview is if there's a no contact order put in place because it's a charged file. So sometimes they would like to have conversations with their partner, and they can't do that because they have children or the finances. So we do a process where they come, do an intake, they do 2 to 3 appointments with safety planning, and then I will present it to the Crown, and they will decide if maybe this could possibly be amended so that there's text or phone calls. Sometimes it is getting back together and them going home with supports put in place. So that is another part of the process to have the no contact order lifted, but that does not mean the charges go away. There's still the charges.
So I guess we've already been talking about this for the last 5 minutes about what we do. So the referrals get to, for the police side of things, every day I come to work and I have this queue. So all the domestic related, family related files kind of get sent to basically my computer. I review everything, ensuring all the proper investigational steps have been taken. Appropriate charges have been laid if there's any follow-up that needs to be done. And then I send all those referrals to the outreach team, and that's where they do their magic. It's really important, I guess, to note that they don't only do the work with the victim or the survivor, we call them, of domestic violence. They also do the work with the abuser or the accused person, and they've actually created a Time for Change program. I don't know if you want to kind of speak to that.
Time for Change is a program, it's a short program that they do one-to-one with a worker, and it's involving abusive behaviors. What those abusive behaviors look like, which ones you're doing, how can you change them, what causes those in that moment. Because some people, I had one client say, oh, I see a pattern, and he was the abuser, and he's seen the pattern of he gets paid, the money goes out to the bills, and then there's nothing left. So then what does he do? He goes and buys a case of beer or 2 cases of beer and has a few drinks, and then there's an argument. And he actually noticed that pattern himself by doing Time for Change. So it was really a good success, and lots and lots of abusers are doing that program. But once they finish that program, if there's more to be done, then we send them to Courage for Change through mental health. So.
I guess just some key points. Prior to SFIT, approximately 80 women entered the outreach program. By 2015, we're including male victims into the program, and males are actually now accepted into the shelter. I know a lot of people don't know that because it's called the Women's Shelter. Men are also able to go there. Referrals from SFIT from outside agencies increased from 24 in 2016 to 217 in 2021, which is like incredible. Another thing I'd like to touch on is Clare's Law. So in 2014, in the United Kingdom and Wales, there was a female by the name of Claire Wood who was murdered by her partner, and her dad was adamant that if Claire knew his history, she never would have dated this guy and this never would have happened. And that's kind of how Clare's Law was born. So here in Alberta in 2021, we passed Clare's Law. So this is a program for anyone in Alberta. They can apply if they have, they're uncertain about their partner's past, there might be some red flags. They can make an application online. It takes about maybe 3 minutes. Once that application is made, it goes to our Clare's Law coordinator in Edmonton. They kind of do comprehensive risk assessments, background checks, gather as much information as possible on this person, and provide kind of a written, it's more of like their documented behaviors by the police. It's not necessarily like a list of their criminal record. And then they get to sit down in a meeting with me, and I give that information to them. They don't get a copy of it. It's completely confidential. There's actually legislation saying that we cannot give that information, to the person that the application was made against. So we can't disclose it to them. They can't FOIP the information. So it's completely private information. No one has to know about it. And yeah, they get their information on any documented behavior by the police. And then it's also a key point for that support, right? We can get that support in place for them. So I think that's probably one of the most important things, whether they choose to stay with the person or leave. It's just a connection point to get services in place. I don't know if I have anything else to add to that.
I think with Clare's Law, what you need to know also is that it doesn't have to be that person that's in the relationship to fill out the form and do the Clare's Law. It can be a parent, it can be a friend, and it's all online. And it's a very simple process. Or you can help your friend do it, or your brother or sister.
So if you are applying on behalf of someone, if you're over the age of 18, you do have to have their consent. Under the age of 18, you don't. But a police officer, if I notice somebody that entered into a relationship and I know that they have a really serious history and I think the person should be aware, I can make the application on their behalf without their consent. So when we first started implementing Clare's Law, they suggested a service our size might see 5 to 7 applications a year. And I think in the first year we were over 20. Now we're into the 40s. So way more than we ever expected, and I think it's a great opportunity for people to, like I've sat in a room with other people, and they've actually said, okay, because it tells you if there's other intimate partners, what that looked like, if there's any violence toward, acquaintances, strangers, any kind of violent behaviors, and it just kind of, I guess, made them think, okay, it's not just me, right? So it kind of put that into perspective, and I think it's helped a lot of people. So it's been really great so far.
Validated their thoughts, and they knew that they weren't alone in that process.
So alberta.ca/Clare's Law is how you apply. Like I said, anyone in Alberta can make the application, and I don't know if anyone has any other questions. I think I kind of covered it all. But I think that's pretty much all I have for our presentation. Pretty short, sweet. But yeah, feel free to ask any questions.
I'll just get that one question here before I kick it to the group here. You said lots are doing the program, and I think, Jenny, you mentioned that. Like lots is how many
Sorry.
You mentioned something like lots are doing the program.
Oh, lots are doing the program. Sorry. That would be,
Like, give me a number. Is it 20,
I would
100?
say, in a year, we're probably looking about 60.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Go ahead.
Do you have any statistics on the success rate of particularly the abusers?
I don't, actually.
Okay.
No.
Do you have any anecdotal?
Well, I don't have stats on that. That is something that we just are, because have only been really seeing the abusers within the last year, year and a half, and really doing that work with them. And there's only so much that we can do because we're not counselors, right? So we educate them on those behaviors, and once we've educated them, then we pass them on to the next step up, okay?
Sarah?
I'm just curious if you know approximately, of the calls for service, how many are repeat offenders or how many are brand new all the time?
I'd say probably close to half would be repeat offenders. We do see quite a lot. We see a lot of people that it's just like completely brand new and we're like, wow, like, you know, there's a lot of people out there that don't report it. It's so underreported. But I would say this is just in my experience and what I've been doing the last 3 years, but I'd say probably close to half are repeat offenders.
I would, yeah, 40. And I've also seen an increase in the family violence end of it, where it's adult child and mother or father in the home. So there's a lot of adults that are living with their parents due to COVID, loss of jobs, loss of all that stuff, and lots of addictions. So I know that has increased a lot for us to deal with when we're looking at those numbers.
How does Clare's Law get known to the public? You know, they would have to know that this law exists, and then they can go and do a search on it. Like, is it promoted? Is it a webpage on your Medicine Hat Women's Shelter group? Like, how does one know about Clare's Law?
So, I mean, when it first came out, I did a interview with Chat News here in town and tried to promote it that way.
Right.
And I know you guys as outreach workers also promote it. Anytime I'm talking to someone, I guess I remind them that this tool is available. And I know it does, it is like, obviously it's on the Alberta government website. And yeah, I guess it's very new. And I think they're ironing out a lot of kinks and trying to figure a lot of that stuff out at this point. But every opportunity I have to talk about it, I do, so.
Yeah, no, it's a great program. It's got to get known to the public. Any other questions? Marco?
Yeah, just a comment. I just recall the last time you did the SFIT presentation for us and how impressed I was with the service you're providing then. It's unfortunate, but I'm also grateful that the program is growing. I wish it didn't need to, but yeah, keep up the terrific work. It's I talk about it whenever I get a chance, and some people are surprised to hear that we have this process in place. So yeah, certainly it needs to be talked about so people hear about it, but great work, and I wish you didn't need it, but I'm glad you're there.
Robert?
Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, thank you again for the presentation. As some of the comments have already been made, I was on the commission when SFIT was initiated by our former chief McGrogan, and obviously has grown and developed, and the word is getting out. I guess when I look at the numbers that you had indicated here, and I couldn't read it quite well, so I may be off, but we're almost looking at a doubling, close to a doubling of calls for service since its initiation to the current. So kind of to Ms. Gahle's question around contributing factors, is there a doubling of calls or others? Have the criteria for calls changed that gives cause for those numbers to have increased as such, or the process change that has contributed to an increased number? Because it is alarming, clearly, and it's an essential service, but when we see that kind of a change in a matter of 6-7 years, that's pretty alarming.
Yeah, so I think there's a number of factors for this. So I think the calls for service are going up. I think as a service, we're doing a better job statistically with these numbers. Like, we've created some new, coding for our calls. In the past, we didn't have the family dispute code. It would just get coded out as dispute other. So sometimes those calls were being missed when we were doing our stats for the year. We even created the assist public for child custody disputes. So we have, and then the Clare's Law as well, right? So just with us doing a better job, I think, in coding our calls, I think it's just, we're just getting better numbers and more accurate numbers, but I mean, it's still gradually going up, I think.
If I could just supplementary, so not just, I just want to be clear, I'm not suggesting that the criteria is informing the numbers or skewing it favorably or unfavorably, depending on how you look at it. Clearly, the numbers speak for themselves, and I'm not surprised, but I'm pleased to hear that through the socialization of this being out there, and there's more informed people, both on both ends of the spectrum, both the abuser and the perpetrators, or the accused, not the accuser, but what's the other one? The accuser and the victim, pardon me, side, that there's greater awareness, but also the fact that through time, there's greater awareness about your team and maybe an acceptance, as strange as that sounds, because it has been socialized. So whatever that is contributed to that number, it is alarming, but it is comforting to Mr. Jansen's point that we have this team together and we have robust process in place, and that as it evolves, we're able to gather more data that's creating a better and more clear picture for intervention. So that's awesome. So thank you very much for all that you do.
Okay, if there are no other questions, the chief has a comment to make before I close it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank the members of SFIT again for all the work you do and for everybody's information here. So Kinsey's coming to the end of her time in this unit. So I just want to thank you, Kinsey, for all, like, you do a great job and you're the right person for the job because you're put such a heartfelt effort into it. So on behalf of all of us, thank you for your time in the unit. And Jarrell, to you, you got big shoes to fill, but you are also selected because you're the right person to move in there now. So I know you'll do a great job for us to step into this role, and thanks to all of you for what you do, because it's amazing. Your work is amazing, so thank you very much.
Okay, yeah, thanks very much. Great work, you guys. Keep it up. Medicine Hat is so lucky. Okay, moving on to the police budget update. Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As noted earlier, we are projecting a negative variance at year end, most of which, the vast majority, is driven by collective bargaining contract settlements with our unions. A budget adjustment is going before City Council next week that speaks to that, and we'll have further report to you next month.
Any questions of the chief? Seeing none, we'll move on to the operational services report. Inspector West.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few things tonight. Just on the heels of the SFIT presentation, one of the highlights is that we did respond to one of many domestic disputes. However, this one was a little bit different. Officers responded after being called and entered into a scene where there had been an obvious domestic or violent domestic dispute. They went to arrest the accused, and a very violent fight ensued, and one of our officers was actually hurt during the melee. So, scene inside the apartment indicated that there had been a violent domestic dispute, and charges were laid, including assaulting a police officer and assault with a weapon. So, just an example of you know, some of the violent domestic violence incidents we go to, we approach these types of incidents very cautiously. You know, you often hear that those are sometimes the most violent and dangerous events that police officers can go to, and that's sort of a case in point there. With regards to K9, we are down to one of our members is injured, so we have a two-person team, 2 officers, 2 canines. One is injured right now. One of the officers is injured, so numbers dropped a little bit due to there just being one canine officer operational right now. That's Constable McPherson and PSD Bronx. However, we do have another officer waiting in the wings for some training. He's been selected, and hopefully we'll be back up to 2 or 3 members in 2024. And just on page 10, one of our SROs of note, so generally they're driving back and forth between the schools. One of our officers, Constable Olenek, very streetwise officer, noticed one of our prolific vehicle thieves in the area as he was driving between schools. and took note and actually managed to make an arrest on that file. So just a good example that our SROs are not only in the schools, they keep their eyes wide open when they're out and about, and they are in full uniform and drive marked police vehicles to the schools. Just moving on to the downtown patrol unit, overall drop in calls this month. If you look at the unwanted guests, we talked a little bit about that in close. They are down a little bit this month, but certainly we could see that on the rise as temperatures start to drop. Just with regard on the following page to the drug treatment court, we're now up to 8 participants in the drug treatment court program, so that's great news, and that program is monitored by Sergeant Brian Bourne of the Downtown Patrol Unit. And that was all I had for open, and welcome any questions.
Any questions of Inspector West? Marco?
Yeah, just curious, status of the officer in that domestic that was injured?
Yeah, so he has a fractured limb, and we've got him on, actually, he's going to be back to work on Monday on modified duties, and he is anxious to get back out on patrols, just has a great attitude about the whole thing. Fairly veteran officer.
Okay, thank you.
Miles?
Just to catch me up here, probably everybody else knows this, but your canine members, are they assigned a patrol area, or are they supplementary to the cars you have out on patrol areas?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do try and keep them free for canine calls. There's sometimes not the volume of calls, and of course, with the resource issues we've had, they're often assigned an area. We try and keep them probably not much different than when you were a member. We try and keep them in areas with lower call volumes so that they are able to respond. We try not to get them tied up on more involved calls like frauds and these types of things and keep them available. But at the end of the day, they are assigned an area and are expected to take patrol calls, plus still have the responsibility of their canine duties. Yeah.
Robert?
Yeah, through the chair to, I guess it would be Inspector West. So the call center, and if I'm just clarifying, that is the center that was initiated during COVID, correct?
Yep.
And then again, when I was last here, I apologize for that theme, but there were discussions about keeping that going forward. There were lots of positive rerouting of calls that reduced or changed the calls for service that we might otherwise see strictly through 911. Can you just generalize the impact of the call center and since that time, and how it has enhanced, I guess, the opportunity for the public at large to communicate with the service and not have it be a 911 call, and just general successes of having that call center in place?
Yeah, so certainly, so the old front counter model, if you will, was one police constable and 2 support staff, and we've reversed that. It's 2 constables and 1 support staff up front now. And so, yeah, so we have continued with the model. Obviously, the volume isn't the same because there was a lot of calls we didn't want to send officers to just because of the social distancing and so forth. So I think the volume of calls is lower. However, they're still providing that same service where calls that don't necessarily need a police officer is routed to the front desk. So, advice calls and all these types of questions, and they're able to look after that. And if they find that, as they get into a call that was routed to them, that an officer does need to, respond, such as there has been a crime and there is a suspect and so forth, those calls are rerouted back out to patrols. But we have had a lot of discussion about the best model up front, and it is working well. It continues to be a success, and so we're staying the course with the members that we have up there. The 2 members that we have up there are on modified duties, but that's worked quite well. They're doing a great job up there.
Sarah?
I like the addition of the map in the DPU section.
Yeah.
And the addition online as well, the crime map online that shows calls for service and kind of where they are. Do we use that information and allocate patrols or additional presence in those areas, or is it just a FYI and we're equally staffed everywhere throughout the city?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So our crime analyst, Amber, is attached to the downtown patrol unit. So she's the part of Sergeant Bourne's team, and she does a great job of doing up intel bulletins, which include crime mapping. Every month, she's actually started doing some more, in-depth ones for certain call types, but that is distributed to the patrol teams every month, in fact, to the whole service. And there's an expectation that in patrol briefings that the NCOs are proactive and are paying attention to the crime mapping, using it in roll call or shift briefing, and that allocating resources to those hotspots.
Just one follow-up, and is curious, is day shift or night shift busier, or are they both the same?
Good question. So I know Inspector Secondiak would tell you that 10, 15 years ago, the night shifts were busier with the more volatile, types of calls. And day shifts have always been busy because that's when people call with, there might be break-ins and car entries and these types of things. But the nature has changed such that day shifts are busier call volume wise, and because there's so much mental health and addictions that the officers are responding to, the day shifts have become busier. In the post-COVID area, a lot of our night shifts were busy with licensed premise safety. That's not so much the case anymore. That's not the same nightlife and club life that there was 10, 15 years ago. So the day shifts are busier and the night shifts have become less call volume. But certainly the big impact is mental health addictions.
I can add one other thing, that if you look at the heat map for downtown, during the summer months, myself and Joe and I, we did live field briefings with our teams out in these areas at 8:30 in the morning. So we would take the team out there, rather than do the briefing in the station, just do it outside. So we did those throughout the summer, and so it added presence downtown, a lot of visibility downtown, and we would certainly do so elsewhere in the city as the need arise. But as some of these areas popped up in the summer, we just started to do briefings outdoors. And that was very well received by the public that saw us out there. And then we also had a lot of police officers walking around downtown kind of before and after, so it was a positive thing.
Did you do it in the red area or the green?
Red.
Oh, good.
Yes, it's the way it shows on the map as where we would do them, and then we'd move around accordingly depending where the issues were.
Joe, a question to you. You mentioned a K-9 member got hurt there. Does the dog, while the officer is off duty, the dog he's off duty also? Because the kind of dog goes with the officer, doesn't
Yeah, the dog goes with the officer.
So he's off too at that
The dog
time,
is
right?
off duty as well, yep.
Awesome. Any other questions? If none, moving on to Investigation and Support Services, Inspector Secondiak, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few updates from my division. Just with respect to training, so I think we're very good at assessing the needs of the service from the training unit. So we do look at crime trends. We talk to the unit supervisors to see what the flavor of the day is, so to speak, in their various areas. But two of the courses we attended last month, one I think we need to do a better job on, and we realize that, is cyberbullying and digital threat assessment training. So we did send all 4 of our members of the school resource officers to that training. I think that is a trend, and I know there's people here in the education world, and undoubtedly they deal with it daily or multiple times a day, the cell phones and cyberbullying and the different apps that come up. So I'm glad we've taken one step into that world from our school resource officers. Another one, we sent one member of the major crime section to a 2-day workshop on motivated violent extremism held in Edmonton. And we have had issues regarding this in Medicine Hat in the past, and it's something we don't want to have again. And with recent wars across the world, I'm glad that we have someone that's trained and prepared for this. Moving on to page 16, just under VA, I know this happened, I believe it was last Police Commission meeting, but we have 2 long-term volunteers, both Brenda Taylor and Kendra Albrecht, that were honored by the city of Medicine Hat, pardon me, for 32 years with the Victim Assistance Unit, and Kendra was at 24 years. That's just absolutely amazing in a unit that is high stress. They deal with a lot of trauma and emotion. Brendan, Kendra do an outstanding job, and they're really the backbone of our volunteers. So I did check with our VA manager today. We currently have 19 volunteers. So we're looking to up that in the future. It'd be nice to have around 30 volunteers. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch on one file on page 16 as well from our major crimes or criminal investigation area. We had a rash of arsons in one day. We had 2 in 1 day period, but it just highlights the great work that was done by patrols who immediately called major crimes and work with the fire service. And I don't normally like to give them credit, but they did a great job in working with our major crimes unit. Here, there was quick identification from video camera by the primary investigator. Search warrants were drafted, and they managed to execute a search warrant and arrest and charge an accused. So great job by all units involved. Those are really the highlights, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Back to the major crimes workshop on IMV. You said we had issues in the past, but we don't have any now, which is good news. Any intelligence inkling that might become a problem in the near future?
I'm always hesitant to say what our intelligence is in an
Fair.
open public meeting, but we are alive to open source media, and we have lots of confidential informants that we talk to. So if there was something, we would deal with it appropriately.
Thank you.
It's more of a inquiring minds, I guess. And I was trying to find, so I had my facts right, but I think the government recently in a report a year or two ago decided to do a regional victims serving society. Has that affected our victims assistance in any way?
Not directly. So the RCMP had one in Bow Island and one in Redcliffe before, and they've amalgamated. So we have offered support to Redcliffe. So not directly. Each municipality, Calgary, Edmonton, Medicine Hat, Lethbridge, we maintain kind of our holistic approach. But I do see that in the future that we could expand our victim services unit. It is strange that if you were a victim of a crime, a sexual assault in Medicine Hat, you get different treatment than you would in Redcliffe, and that's wrong because we have access to dogs and SFIT and different programming. So the goal is to have victims treated the same whether you're in rural Alberta or in a municipality.
Any other questions of Inspector Secondia? Seeing none, thank you. Chief, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only thing I want to bring up is it was announced in the news today, you may or may not have heard, the provincial government has established a 6-person team of sheriffs based out of Lethbridge. It's part of the Safer Communities and Neighborhoods team, so it's the acronym is SCAN. So they'll be based out of Lethbridge, but they'll serve all of southern Alberta, including Medicine Hat. So that was, I think that's a good thing for policing in the south of the province. And what SCAN tries to do is they work on problem properties that tend to be involved in the drug trade. And they use means that are available to them legally to either shut those places down or to have them cleaned up. So that's it's a great thing that the province has done that with this 6-person team. And we've already been in contact with the sheriffs, and I believe they're coming to our building next week to speak to us about how they'll work with us on this. So that's a positive thing for all the chiefs in the south are very supportive of that. So just wanted to raise that.
And is that fully funded by the provincial?
Funded by the province, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions of the chief? Seeing none, thank you. Moving down to no new business, no action, raw action, community consultation. Do we have anyone in the gallery that has? Okay. I'll just have Terry just spell out some parameters for community consultation while you're working your way down.
Any member of the public will be given 2 minutes to ask their question or share comments. Any questions or comments will be directed towards the chair of the commission, who may in turn ask the police service to respond. Please note that complaints about officer conduct and MHPS policies are not topics for this forum. There's a process under the Alberta Police Act for such matters. And you know all of that, so go ahead.
how many calls were diverted in the year that they were going? Mental health calls? Any idea?
I don't recall the exact number, but it was near 1,000, 800 to 1,000 approximately.
Okay, and I know they've lost their funding and they, went to city council and asked for money and they said, well, it's a provincial health issue. But I was also thinking if it diverts a lot of police officers that, you don't need armed police officers to respond to all these mental health calls, aren't you getting some savings there and maybe some money could be found in the police budget? Just something to mull over is all I'm saying.
Yeah, I won't speak to the stats, but what I can speak to is that we are working behind the scenes to revive that team, potentially in a different way. So we recognize the value of it. You're absolutely correct in the value. And there's other ways that we're going to look at the revival of that team. So your points are valid.
Okay, and I just had one other thing. I was wondering where I could find access to police policies and procedures. Other organizations have these things online. Where can I find that
We
information?
have them posted. Pardon me, go ahead.
We don't post many of them because there's a lot of techniques interwoven in our policies and procedures. So there is a process, you could FOIP parts of them, but they would be redacted depending on the nature of the policy.
Okay, thanks very much.
Nothing else? Okay. Upcoming meetings, the next scheduled meeting is Wednesday, December 20th. That'll be at the call of the chair. So for the community, just maybe check the website if there will be a meeting or not. We'll post that notice of that meeting. However, the January one, Wednesday, January 17th will take place at 6 o'clock. If there are no further comments or anything, I hereby declare the meeting adjourned at 6:46.